Welcome to another episode. What are you reading? What are you writing? A weekly video podcast features creatives, writers, and readers, and we come together to talk about books. I am your host, Karen E. Osborne, author of 4 novels and counting. I am so glad you're here. I think you're going to enjoy our next guest. So you had the pleasure of meeting Karla Huebner last year, and she is back with a new book. Hey, Karla.
Hi, so good to be back.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you. I can't wait to talk to you about this book and about your mysterious pen name. So let me just tell you that Karla has a brand new book, and it's under her name, Colette. Oh, I forgot that quickly. Karla, please tell us how to pronounce the last name.
That's okay because as I was just telling Karen, since it's a made up name, you can pronounce it as you wish. But I took the first part of it from the French author Colette, who has always been a favorite of mine, and the last name comes from the word tajemna or tajemny, which is a Czech word that means secret, which I thought would be absolutely fabulous for a mystery writer last name. And so you've heard how it can be pronounced if you want to sound like a Czech, which would be great. But you could also pronounce it like a French person and say Tajemna, or I'm fine with Tajemna too, because we're not speaking a foreign language here. We have a made up pen name. So,
I love it. So, under her made up pen name, she has written a novel, The Corpse in the Trash Room. And it's a murder mystery that takes place on a college campus in the 1970s.
and I'm
There it
trying to get
is.
that book cover to look right in on the I
Yeah, you got it.
got it. Okay, great.
Yes, it looks good. It's good. So, tell us why you chose, just get us rolling here. Why did you decide to write under a pen name?
Um Well, when I first wrote the book, I felt like it should be under a pen name for various reasons that don't really matter at this point.
Mm,
When I, finally ended up publishing it, I decided to keep it under the name that I originally wrote it with because I thought, all right, I have books that are under my legal name,
mhm,
and they are quite different from this. And I've seen that authors, particularly in genre fiction, will very often differentiate their different lines with different names. Now, and that helps with things like the Amazon algorithm and
mm,
things like that. Sometimes those names aren't very different. So sometimes it's that, one of the names has initials and the other one has the full name. Uh, but that's something that, I thought it's not a secret pen name, obviously, but
mhm.
it's a pen name that, you know, means that people don't have to get confused by looking at, all the other kinds of things I write. I mean, if I had really thought this through, I would have, for instance, put my first book, which was a scholarly book, maybe under an initial rather than my whole name, so that it wouldn't pop up necessarily with my novels. But again, it's not a big secret, so
Mm.
it's more kind of a practicality, playfulness kind of thing.
Oh, good. Yeah. You don't worry about your fans following you, like finding you?
Oh, well, we'll just have to see how that goes. I mean, that's always the harder part.
All right, so fans out there, you have to find her under both names. You have to look for her under both names. So, you just showed us the cover, and I understand. I looked at the attribution, and you drew that
I I designed it. I wouldn't say that I
design.
drew it, but
Ah,
I did design it. Um, while I can draw reasonably well, I mean, I drew a lot as a kid, did a lot, took a lot of art classes and things, ended up later on as an art historian. I wouldn't say that I draw to the standard that I could have drawn the things on the cover. So I was using what we refer to as clip art. So it's either, copyright free or that you pay for the rights to use it. And so I took an image of a hamster because
Let's
there
see,
is
leaping.
a hamster in the book. And I took an image of a trash can because there's also trash can in the book. Corpse is discovered right
In the
away
trash
on a
room.
trash can.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
and then
So,
found a nice frame and, played around with it a bit. But I do enjoy doing collage and I have done a bit of design, and then, my brother, who has more graphic design experience than I do, kind of tweaked it a little bit to make it
ah,
more perfect.
excellent. It runs in the family. That's very cool. So you told me that you actually wrote this book 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So, I have two-part question on that. So one, why did you decide? Because lots of us write a book and then we put it aside. 30 years is quite a long time. But why did you decide to bring it back? And then tell me why is it in the 1970s? Is that related to its well, you tell us the story. Why did you
Okay.
decide to bring it back?
Well, when I was first writing it, so, 30 plus years ago, um, I was setting it, at the time that I was in college. Um, and, I had I had just read Sarah Caldwell's "Thus Was Adonis Murdered," which was an absolutely I totally recommend it, all of her sadly too few books. Um, humorous British murder mystery. And one of the things with Thus Was Adonis Murdered, besides that it's both murder and humorous, is that it had a team of sleuths, totally
Mhm.
amateur. It's a group of young lawyers in London, and it occurred to me that, oh, it would be really fun to have, you know, a group of Americans who were friends, and who end up being sleuths. And I thought, oh, um, I had kind of like a whole gang of friends when I was in college. Um, most people probably did. Let's make it a group of college students that all live on the same hall, or pretty much all. And so, that got me started writing it. Um, and and at that time, I did make some, once I had finished it,
Mhm.
um, I did make some efforts to find an agent. I spent some time, sending out the query letters and, doing all the, because I'd been publishing short stories for a while at that point. It was like, oh, I've finally, written a book. This is exciting. Um, and I wasn't quite getting anywhere, although back in those days, you actually did get answers from agents,
Mm.
much more reliably than you do today. But I got kind of sidetracked after a while on other projects, some of which were not writing related. And so I kind of put it aside and wrote other things. Um, you know, Wrote most of another novel, went off to graduate school, led
But why bring it back now? Why what was the impetus for saying now?
well. Now, what was happening was, I was working on and finished last year a very different novel that is set in the same period and also relates to college students. Um, Totally different mood, Uh,
Mhm.
but I thought, I wonder, maybe I should reread that old murder mystery that is, lying in the drawer. And so I did, and I thought, well, hey, I wrote this an awfully long time ago, but I still really like it. So, I mean, sometimes you have that reaction of, "Oh, how could I ever have
Oh,
standed to,
no.
stood to write this dreck?" But in this case, it was like, well, yeah, there's some things that need to be fixed in it, but I thought, this wouldn't take very much to, pull into shape. And so then I decided to go ahead with it, and you know, so there it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, there it is. So give us the premise of the book and tell us about this gang of of sleuths led by Keith, right?
Yes.
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 So what's the premise of the book and tell us about the gang?
All right. Well, I think one of the things with a humorous mystery, and I'm not saying that this always has to be the case, but it certainly helps when you're going to have humor, is that you've got a relatively unliked victim, so that
Mm,
nobody is, or few people are, tremendously mourning that person. And sure, people want to know, why they've died, etc., and is it really murder, or who killed them, whatever. But so I cast about, and I thought, well, let's have an unlikable, or at least much disliked by everyone in the book, kind of victim. And so then I cast about and thought, well, and why would somebody kill this person? What would be a good reason for that? So I kind of built it out like that. And so I started out with my group of sleuths because I wanted to work with them, and then I had to come up with the right murder, and
yeah.
the right killer, and so forth. And so I thought back to, and talked to other people, and thought about things that people did back in the days when I was in college, which in some ways are very similar to what people today do, and in some ways are very different. And of course, it really depends on what kind of college you went to, whether it
Right.
was, a livelier place or a more conservative place, or whether it's, I mean, this
Huge, a little. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it'd be very different if I were writing about a commuter college like the primarily commuter college that I ended up teaching at, but I made this a university that's the primarily residential, like the one that I went to, and so, there's life is very strongly centered on the place you live in the dorms, like which dorm you live in,
Mm,
which
mhm.
hall in the dorm. Are you friends with the people on your hall? Does your hall, have a particular reputation? Like, are they the big party hall, or are they the studious hall, or do they mix the two, which my group kind of does? So what kind of what we can say, since it's all happens at the very beginning of the book, is that Carolyn's hamster is discovered dead in the habit trail. This upsets Carolyn naturally. They end up deciding to have a group funeral for the hamster. Um, and then, rather drunkenly, I'm afraid, they they all decide to, troop out to the trash room, where you've got one of those trash chutes
Mm.
where you fling everything down there, but you've also got, like, bins for recycling and so forth. And so when they get to the trash room and open it up, they discover the body of their preceptor from the dorm, whom none of them could
None of
stand.
them like, and we're
Yes.
off and running.
Yes.
So so is this a cozy movie, like, where everybody's in a kind of in a room, or is this a more
It's close to cozy.
It's coast to
Um,
cozy.
yeah, I don't think we can technically call it cozy because it does I mean, like, I often see that, "Oh, cozies can't have any swearing in them." Well, these are
Oh,
college
well,
students, they swear.
yes, yes.
Um,
I didn't know that
so
rule.
I don't think everybody follows it, but apparently a lot of readers get really upset if they read what is billed as a cozy and then they discover that someone has sworn, or used, some, you know, obscenity in it. And so I would describe it as kind of a classic style of murder mystery, cozy adjacent, and it's got amateur sleuths. It's a relatively closed environment because almost everything happens either in the dormitory or in the dining hall. Um, when people go downtown, for instance, that happens kind of off stage. Keith
Mm.
doesn't go downtown during this. He's recounting the story. And, so he talks about, when people have returned from their visit to Woolworths or whatever.
Yes, yes. So it
It's
sounds like fun. It sounds like a really fun book, and I love, having worked, in, higher ed for many years. It sounds like a really fun read. That sounds great. Um, let's go back to Keith for a second.
Mhm.
So, I know there's a band of sleuths, but he's kind of your lead guy, right?
Yeah.
Well, what do you really like about Keith? Like, what's great about Keith?
I think there are a lot of things I like about Keith, which may not be the same things all readers will like about him. Some readers have thought he was kind of stuffy because he likes more ornate language. But Keith is a guy with a sense of humor. It's kind of a dry sense of humor, but he's a guy that he's studying to be a historian. He is interested in the history of France. He has really quirky things like he reads Tintin comics from France and has a Tintin clock. I took those from one of my college friends. Um, he's someone that was, okay with playing with the hamster when it was still alive. Um, he's,
Good point, Carla.
you know
When at least it was when he was still alive.
yes, nobody plays with the hamster after it's dead.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I mean, they do have the weird, silly funeral, um, ceremonies, but, yeah, the hamster was enjoyed as a live creature, and for, others of us who love animals, there is a living rabbit who is a lively character in the book as well.
Oh, I
Um,
love it when authors make animals fully fleshed out characters. That's always so fun. So, are you working on anything now?
I am working on lots of things. I mean, in some ways, I'm a little bit this fall in between projects because I'd gotten this out. I've been busy promoting it and my other books. I also just was at a really interesting intensive writing workshop with the author Stuart
Mm.
Onan and a small number of other writers. Um, so, I mean, I've been busy with various things, and I've got manuscripts that are, some that are close to done, some that are in the middle, some that are kind of. So it's kind of like, okay, which is going to be the next one that I really focus on?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so that's kind of the question. But so yes, I'm working on things, but it's hard to say, "Oh, well, my next is."
Yes, yes. Well, I'm gonna speak to your manuscripts and say, hopefully, she doesn't let any of you stay there for 30 years. So, as you think about your life as a reader, because this is what are you writing? What are you reading? Is there any book or author that had like a really profound impact on either your writing or your life?
Oh, there are, of course, so many.
But we
Um,
can only do
but
one.
Only one. Oh, okay. Well, I've already mentioned Sarah Caldwell, so, um, and I already kind of mentioned Colette. I think for the moment, we'll say Robertson Davies. He's someone that I first read in my 20s, which was, I think, when he was becoming probably the best known in the United States. He was already quite famous in Canada, which is where he was from.
Mm,
But he he wrote his novels in, with a sense of humor, but also with a sense of magic and awe.
mm.
And those are books that I can readily return to over and over again.
Yeah, that's cool. I don't know his work at all. Is there any book that you've read recently that you can recommend to our audience? Something more recent?
Ah, um, well, what I just finished rereading was Muriel Sparks' A Far Cry from Kensington.
Mm.
So it's not such a recent book, uh,
But
but
a
uh,
recent read?
but a recent read, and I think one of her best. She's really well known for The Prime of Jean Brodie, which I also enjoy, but some of her books are a bit weirder, and this one was definitely weird, and I hadn't read it for a long, long time. And so I would definitely recommend it to anyone that's looking for something that, on the one hand, is set in, the world we live in. Um, it's set, in 1950s Britain. She wrote it long after that, but where the narrator is telling us about her attempts to get established working in the world of publishing, but she's got a um, kind of a, fellow boarder in a boarding house, a Polish woman who, uh, you know, experiences some really strange things and mysteriously commits suicide.
Mm,
Which, I
mm,
mean, that's a downer, but there's curiosity about, well, was she kind of nudged into, being of unsound mind by someone that the narrator knew and
mm,
disliked.
Okay, intriguing, intriguing. So now you have intrigued all of our audience. And how can they find, and you have so many books, you're so talented, you write in, short stories and novels, and you change genres. How can people find out more about you, be in touch with you, find out more about your books?
Okay, that is pretty easy for anyone that is on the internet, which anyone listening to this podcast will
Are.
be. Um, my website is karlahuebner.com. And so I have a page for The Corpse in the Trash Room, even though it's under a different name.
Mhm.
So, you can find everything there. Also, I have a writer Facebook page. Um, I have an Instagram account. Those are all with my name, Karla Huebner. Um, I'm occasionally on Twitter as well. And you can find my books online through all of the likely retailers. I mean, not just Amazon, but Barnes& and Noble, Kobo. If you're international, my books are pretty much internationally available through a wide variety of places as well. Bookshop.org also. So it's easy to find me once you've heard of me.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Well, I hope that you all will follow Carla, that you will go on her website, look at all of the wonderful books that she's written, that you will buy her latest, and that you will write a wonderful review because you all know how important reviews are, right? I know that you write reviews of all your authors that you enjoy. And I hope that when you do reach out to Karla, you'll let her know that you met her on What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Thanks, everybody, and see you next week. Bye bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.